So when you then have a child that's born, you're told that without life-saving open heart surgery, he'll probably die. You go, so you know all those things you said you're going to be as a dad? You can't be. And whilst I felt utterly alone, the reality was she was there.
You don't need to have the words in order to reach out. Sometimes it is enough to just say, I don't know where my head's at and I don't know how I've got here, but right now I'm really struggling.
Yeah. There's some of the benefits of the age we live in have then become some of the things that have created why we have loneliness, isolation. I think increasing rates of people struggling isn't because people have become weaker, it's because the context and the environments have changed that meant meaningful connection has become little or none.
And I'd love to get your opinion on it, because I think often in life and the way men perceive women in our day and age, that, you know, you need to learn from a man in order to become a man, when in actual fact, my strength comes from a woman.
There are moments of beauty, kindness and wonder all around us. That doesn't undo the trauma people go through. But I think if we take the time to recognise the moments of light, then the moments of darkness perhaps become a little less.
Start this. Wonderful. Right.
Am I looking at you or am I looking there?
Looking at me.
Looking at you, right, cool.
Yeah, just ignore these little camera entrapments. So Ivan, thank you very much for joining me today in the wonderful Marden Quarry. For those that don't know, Ivan, aka the Thrive Guy. Well, actually, you know what? I was going to introduce you, but it is often better that the guest introduces themselves, because I feel like I will not half-arse it, but it will pale in comparison to you being able to do it yourself. So if you want to introduce yourself, Ivan, that'd be great.
Alex. It's the Thrive Guy thing we can maybe come on to, because that's a funny one as to how that's come about, I think. But yeah, Ivan Hollingsworth. I'm founder and director of Centric Consultants, which we set up, my wife and I, 4.5 years ago. Which maybe this will lead you in a little bit, because we set it up, I think, whether we could articulate it like this at the time, but with that goal of trying to help individuals, teams and organisations to thrive. And I think, and it's not that that's our kind of, in our bio for what we do, but I think what we recognise is that we wanted to try to change how people might be able to work and operate together and help people. From wherever they're coming from, so that's I guess that from a professional point, that's me. Yeah,
and where did that need to help people develop and like nurturing their, I suppose, well-being in the workplace come from? Is there like something that happened prior that just led you down that road?
I did not. I mean, both of us operated. I spent 17 years in the pharmaceutical industry, my wife in the recruitment industry. Both, you know, good jobs, but in industries that could be brutal at points. There's no kind of, I wouldn't say any specific horror stories that, you know, we faced trauma and felt like we wanted to turn it. But I think there's a few things for me. Firstly, I could not see myself doing that job for another year, let alone another 20 years. And while for lots of people I think that might mean they were lost, I realised that years ago. It had come about because we were doing a lot of stuff within fundraising and campaigning that we were making a difference. And not just the obvious difference through the impact we were having through our fundraising, but actually the way in which we did our fundraising, the way in which we brought people together was transformational. Like for us, and then others reflected back for them as well. So I think it then became this disconnect between there's part of our life where we were fulfilled and we felt like we were positively impacting other people. Then you go to work, you just do a job.
Yeah.
And whilst there's nothing wrong with that, that genie had come out of the bottle and I couldn't put it back.
Yeah.
So I think the years, and it was a number of years, Alex, that took to kind of go, is this a pipe dream? Is there actually, you know, the Venn diagram of what are you good at and what are you passionate about, and does the world care enough to pay you?
Yeah.
Because otherwise you're living a passion, but it's not a career. And so I think it took a while to get to where we are today. But I think fundamentally it's coming from a positive place about what can you create conditions where you can help people do their best work, to live their best life, mindful of the fact that it's not always rainbows and sunshine, right? Sometimes it's tough.
Going on from what you were saying there, because in terms of where you are now, the role that you're in, and just feeling a lot more content and comfortable with the direction that things are going, did all that was that all happening before or after your son Seb became really ill? Because he was ill from birth, wasn't he? And I haven't touched on that, so again, it's good for you to just kind of describe that as well as just, you know.
Yeah, no, I don't. So I've done a lot of reflecting in the last year and a half of this, because I'm trying to bring it all into some meaningful package to understand my life and what's happened, and it does absolutely play that, because before Seb was born, it was almost like a pre that and a post that version of me, and I think that's right, because when you have a child, as we did, our first child, hours after he's arrived in the world, you're told he's got a devastating congenital heart defect that without major life-saving surgery, he wouldn't reach his second birthday. And so to suggest that doesn't inform or even change your life, for me, I don't understand how that couldn't to anyone.
Yeah.
And so, you go through that moments of being told that, and his emergency surgery when he was a tiny baby. In those moments, I don't think I was thinking about how I can help the world, change the world, live within my purpose. You're just clinging on. You're basically going, right, if the job pays me a living and I'm just about functioning for my wife Nadine and Seb, then I'll take that.
Yeah.
But I think what that led to, and thankfully, his surgery was successful and he is thriving, that we were able to start to think about things differently. We viewed life differently. I think that is, I can't speak for other people, but I know what Nadine and I are like, and we don't tend to do things half-hearted.
Yeah.
I think that's probably always been who I am. And my mum probably would have said that at the time when she was still alive, and always had quite funny phrases of, are we allowed to swear?
Absolutely.
Where she would always, for one of her phrases, there was many phrases I've inherited from her, was "no shit, Sherlock." Of course, that's what you're supposed to be doing. Just took you a while to realise it. Like in her head, there'd be no question of it. But sometimes we've got our head up our own arse for so long. And sometimes it's that moment, that epiphany of, the clouds part, the sun shines through, and it feels like it's some sort of biblical moment. Maybe for me it was trauma, and maybe it was that. But I think we found ourselves into fun. We started fundraising, and then I started campaigning, and suddenly, from feeling like, what the hell is a personal trainer or a pharmaceutical salesperson? How the hell am I changing the world?
Yeah.
I suddenly felt like I'd found a way that I could make a positive impact. Yeah. And that was different. Yeah. That was like it became two ways I describe it. First of all, that understanding my purpose of how I want to show up in the world became like a compass point. Right? Compass point doesn't change. I go off track every now and again, but that hasn't changed. The other part of what that feels in me, and I think it was Michelangelo, I'm never good at remembering these things, who said that he does do sculptures, doesn't he? I'm terrible, I should know all this sort of stuff, but essentially it was I'm
going to say yes.
Yeah, I think it was him, but anyway, I don't create the sculptures, I just remove the rock that sits around the beautiful thing that was already there. Yeah. That, for me, was that thing of, what I found wasn't out there, what I found was inside. And maybe I just needed to go through something difficult to strip past all the bullshit and go, that's there, which is why I think my mum would have gone, it was there all along. Yeah.
Well, what I've heard it described as is like the dark night of the soul, where, there's a moment in your life where you think you've got your head screwed on, or, nothing can kind of take me down now. I'm pretty strong in what I've been through, and nothing else could, ruin what's going on now, and then all of a sudden life just chops the legs from underneath you and teaches you a brand new lesson. And I suppose, you know, with being a father, and I don't think often you ever really kind of listen or hear conversations with men around, well, dare I say, fatherhood, and also trauma that comes in the form of your son, who you're so happy to be bringing into the world, then all of a sudden realizing that, oh my God, he might not be with us because of his congenital heart disease. You know, like, what does that do to a father who is balancing that excitement and love, but then also all of a sudden that unexpected fear and worry?
I think there's so many things that kind of layer into who we are as people, right? And some of it we're aware of, we're conscious of it, some of it we're totally unaware of, but it's still playing a part. I, through no reasons of feeling like I had to be not some uber masculine macho thing, because I can't really be asked with that, and people who do that are normally just faking it anyway. But I, as an individual, I would describe or perhaps even define myself as someone who's strong, as someone who's resilient. And because of challenges I'd had in my childhood, and sort of relationship with my dad broke down when my mum and dad got divorced, and so from a fairly young age I went through, you know, probably my first major trauma, which is a complete breakdown in the relationship with my own dad when I was at a key part of a young man, a boy's development. That had an impact in terms of fatherhood, but not in a negative, in terms of how I want to show up in the world as a dad. You know, I felt like I wanted to not be the victim who then couldn't become a dad or was a crap dad because of their own experiences and trauma. Yeah. And my dad was going through difficulty, significant difficulty, and we thankfully we reconciled and things were fantastic a number of years later. But that informed how I wanted to be a dad, and that strength and that resilience that I in a very narrow view, I perceived strength and resilience in myself, meant that my job as a dad was to show up all the time, and when you show up, be strong and be resilient, and within that, protect your family. That's not to suggest that women can't, none of that. It's just because that's your job. That's your job, because that's not necessarily what I had as a child, and so I'm going to do that. So when you then have a child that's born, you're told that without life-saving open heart surgery, he'll probably die. You go, so you know all those things you said you're going to be as a dad? You can't be. That you can't. You're now going to hand over your baby to a team of people you've probably never met before, and go like, and so that as a part of it just completely stripped away how I was going to be. So whatever trauma you're facing, and you can never compare one person's with another person's, but for me, all of that stuff that's layered in, that's baked into who I am, then into that moment of trauma, for me just felt like it was an absolute tidal wave.
Well, that must be terrifying, because I often find that with a lot of trauma comes the realization that the position I'm in doesn't allow me a sense of control. It's out of my hands, and I've just got to learn hard acceptance and just trust that the best thing I can do is just show up in the only way that I can each day, and also just trust that everything else that's going on around me and everyone that is working towards, in your case, helping your son get better, that it'll work out. And any bumps along the way we'll just have to deal with as it comes. But that I've always found that lack of control and the realization that, oh my God, I'm very limited in what I can do, that has often rendered me feeling completely useless. And in certain moments just makes me think, oh my God, I don't know if I can cope with this.
No, I think you're right. I think it's interesting, because I think and so much of this I think is testament to my mum and the way she brought me up, is that I still showed up I still showed up, and I still, you know, I don't. You have to speak to my wife to know probably the honest truth is that. But I don't feel there was a 3 to 6 month period where I just like checked out.
Yeah.
Like I was still there. I still, you know, that part of me that's baked into me, I think probably more nurture than nature, is I'm still showing up.
Yeah.
I'm still showing up. The problem I had, certainly when, and the response to Seb going into theatre, that was the lowest of the low point for me, not just because of, you know, like kissing him on the head outside theatre, saying I love him and seeing him wheeled off. And then the quite cruel, I'd reflect on this more recently, the rules that the anaesthetist had at the time, this one anaesthetist, was that only one parent could go in when the child was put under. So my wife went in with him and I sat outside on my own. Now Seb's more recent surgery he had, we both went in, because that's the humane thing to do, right? Yeah. But he was thinking logistics rather than compassion.
Yeah.
So I sat outside theatre and literally fell apart. Like had the nurse not, literally she put her hand on my shoulder and literally just put a stool there, I would have crumpled to the floor. And whilst I felt utterly alone, the reality was she was there. I just didn't realise she was there consciously. And I think in that moment, that lack of control, allied with the complete dismantling of the thing, for me it's, if I don't have my strength and my resilience, I don't have anything. Yeah. And therefore I am nothing. Like that's what you bring to the table. You know, I had a few mates back in the day when mum was really ill who would, you know, their phraseology, what they would call me would reflect how they perceive strength. That I showed up. Yeah. That was always there. I'm on. And if it's on for a hug and crying, I'm on, and I'm on, and I'm on, and I'm on. The problem is that there comes a point where you start to feel like, well, you're strong and you're resilient, because I've been able to cope with most things in my life pretty well and come out as a reasonably functioning human. In that moment, it was like, yeah, no, you haven't got them. And whilst I know that's flawed, it's just our perception. So I think as I go back in those months afterwards, I know I showed up. I know I still was trying to be the kind of person I wanted to be in the world and the kind of dad and husband. The problem was within me, it was the start, the very painful start of basically going, you're not that, but what are you? Yeah. And that journey hasn't stopped, but that's the point. So to go back to your original question, a very long way of answering a short question, is that I think without question, there have been other significant inflection points in my life, but that would be the one. Yeah. That's almost, you'd have to just draw a line and go, there was a point before and there's a point after. Yeah. And it was May the 5th, 2009.
And during all that, did you have the support, or did you even want the support where you could talk about what was going on in your head, how you were feeling, or was it something where you felt like, I need to keep some of it in order to keep a sense of strength while this really tough period's going on?
I think it's a few things. I think I've been blessed with amazing women in my life, and Nadine is one of those people. One of the biggest challenges you have, and I don't know the specific data on this, but one of the challenges you have with couples when their children are going through such significant challenges is how do you maintain a relationship where you support each other when you don't have the energy to support yourself? And I think that is that's difficult, because Nadine and I, you know, we're running the business now. We've got a pretty damn good marriage and family, and we enjoy spending time with each other whilst also running a business and all these different things. And that means you've got to intuitively know when, if you can't quite pull what you need to pull because you're carrying some stuff, then I've got you. Yeah. In that moment, you're going, I've not got enough for me. So in that moment, you're going, the person I would ask for support, I'm not going to ask Nadine for support. Yeah. That's so you've got that. The other person, mum, isn't around anymore. And I think whilst I've got amazing friends, the problem I created, the thing I created was through my strength and my resilience and how I showed up in the world, I think there was a dual thing of, I was probably less likely to say, I'm struggling, like I need help.
Yeah.
They're also less likely to see it because I think, hopefully I haven't got this wrong, my perception of how they see me is that I've got stuff sorted.
Yeah.
I'm all right. Probably because that's what I put out in the world. So you have this thing where you go, I need help. And I've got a couple of mates, I've talked about this very openly recently, who they know. They're not necessarily my closest mates in the world, but they know when I message them that I don't just want to catch up, that I need help.
Yeah.
Because one of the hardest things, you'll know this, is when you're in a hole, the physical act of saying, Alex, like I'm on the edge here, mate. I don't know, I understand this, I teach people, I help people with this, but I'm still trying to work out how the hell you do it yourself.
And that's like,
especially when the world then sees you as strong, they're not asking you, they're not proactively going, mate, let's just go for a beer.
Yeah. And that's like one of the, like, and I find it quite frightening and upsets me sometimes, because you think about, like, you know, we're lucky to be able to have those friendships and those connections and have had the experiences where we're able to reach out. But then I think, like, oh my God, how many people are out there who are in those moments and don't have the ability to just say to somebody, I am on the edge.
Yeah.
Because I think back to some of my lowest moments, and I do wonder, if I didn't have the ability to think, right, I can talk about this and I can reach out, would I still be here, or how much lower would I have got? Because when you do think back, you think, God, like, I was barely hanging on by a thread. And, you know, sort of like, how do you, or what would you say to people in order to help them understand the value of cultivating those kind of friendships and that ability to reach out and just say, actually, like, I might, and this is me answering my own question, I suppose, but I often say to people, you don't need to have the words in order to reach out. Sometimes it is enough to just say, I don't know where my head's at and I don't know how I've got here, but right now I'm really struggling.
Yeah, I think there's a few things. I think to know what to do when you're in a hole, to me, is unicorns. It's mythical, right? There may be a way that someone else cleverer than me has worked that out. I don't know what it is, right? I think it is, and this may not help people who are in a hole right now. The first thing I would say is, when you're not in one, that's when to say, who are the people who I can message and just go, do you fancy a catch up? And you know that message means I need a coffee or I need a beer. I need it fairly soon. Yeah. Right? That's the first thing. I think we often wait till we're in trauma to hope people have got it. I think we need to cultivate those relationships now. I think there are many, I don't think I can solve the world's problems, but I think I've got some fairly simple answers to some fairly complex challenges we're in right now. And I think without meaningful connection, we don't get anywhere to where we need to be as a human race. Yeah. Right? I can talk about it at corporate success and organisational goals and performance, or I can talk about human level of just showing up and engaging in meaningful connection with people is the single most important thing we need to do as a human race. Yeah. The entire world we live in is pulling against that. So it sounds simple, but we are all incredibly busy and technology pulls us away from it. So those pull us that way, which means we have to intentionally do that. I think we have to do it not just when we're in trauma. I think the other thing I feel, and I'll give you a quick example of this, right? Because I think this is absolutely relevant when someone else is obviously going through trauma. There's the, what do we need to do? Who do we need around us when I can just say, I might even just message you 5. I'm a 5 out of 10. I'm a 4. I just message you a number. Right? And you just know that's me at suboptimal. I don't mean suboptimal in the nonsense. That's me going, mate, the clouds are coming in. Yeah. And you're like, I'll be there in 10. Right? You need to create that with people who have got your back. The other part for me is, what do we need from other people? And I think it's not to judge people who do this, but how can I help? If I ask you that when you're in trauma, you don't know how I can help, right? That's a cop-out on my part, right? I just do something. I act now. I act now on the basis that I'm going to help. I can't save you, but I'm going to help, right? So example, Seb's out of theatre, is in intensive care. He's incredibly poorly. This is, if not pre-social media, it's 2009, so social media was nothing like it is now. And one of my oldest and best mates, Simon, he lives in Banbury, 240 miles away. He's Seb's we'd asked him to become Seb's godfather, even though it hadn't officially happened yet. Simon, I've only had brief conversations about what was going through his head at the time, but he got in the car on this particular day, drove 240 mile up the country with a bag of, he had newspapers, he had snacks and sandwiches and energy drinks, and just basically an emergency pack of things, thinking, well, are they eating, are they drinking? Well, if he sat there next to the bedside, maybe he just wants to read the newspaper, I don't know. He drove 240 miles up the country, and all he was going to do was just leave it in the waiting room outside intensive care. It just happened that all the parents had been asked to leave because they were having to do a procedure on a very, very poorly little baby. So as we walked out, Simon was literally dropping the bag onto a chair and was going to turn around and drive 240 miles home. He didn't wait to ask what I needed. He just acted. And I think that, I'll get emotional talking about, I think that is one of the most powerful acts of love like anyone's ever done. So he didn't ask, he didn't have to. Yes, he's my mate, but he just did it. And I think that's the bit. We don't need to ask people, how can I help? Just help. And if you know the person well enough, you're not going to be a million miles away from doing something. If nothing else, just your presence of being there. And so I think, for me, I'm often in that space of just thinking, who are the half a dozen people who I would intuitively know what to do, and I just do it.
And that's Simon. Simon, what a legend. Creating the blueprint
that's it.
For best case scenarios of what to do. And it's true, because I've seen people online say it. You know, it's like, I think I saw one post online where someone was like, at the lowest time in my life, my friends just came round and cooked them food, or just helped them clean the house. And I think you forget about, you know, help doesn't have to be a grand gesture or an answer. It can be, you know, just go back to people's base needs. Are they eating right? Are they sleeping right? Can I help them clean, or just create a little less clutter in a world where their mind just feels like a mess?
100 years ago, you wouldn't have needed it, because 100 years ago, you'd have had aunties, uncles, grandparents, cousins, all living within half a dozen streets of you. And so the mobility we've gained through moving around the country or around the world has been wonderful. What it's meant then is that we don't have that very immediate community on our doorstep. And so I think there's some of the benefits of the age we live in have then become some of the things that have created why we have loneliness, isolation. I think increasing rates of people struggling isn't because people have become weaker, it's because the context and the environments have changed that meant meaningful connection has become little or null. And I think that there's no blame on that, but it means that we've got to be really intentional when we do things, because people on our street we may not ever speak to or know well enough that they would know, which means someone's got to go 240 mile away. I'm just going to get in the car and drive. Right? That's not a judgment on the mates who lived closer, but if you lived, as I say, in a street with all of the people you've grown up with, that would be very different. So I think that's where we sit at a spot, and I think what I recognise through that is the power of what I think was as I say, the greatest act of love and care that didn't come with anything. It wasn't because he was my mum or someone, and that more of that. Just more of that. Not that someone's going through deep trauma, just more of that. It starts to at least move us to a space where people feel less alone, more like they can they can cope with some of the difficulties they're facing, not just the big life changing, sometimes just the small day-to-day things.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. I mean, I'd love to not break up the flow of this conversation, but I've just got to check and make sure that
I'll get a mouthful of water.
the camera's still rolling. And I want to bring this up because I know you've mentioned it a few times. You mentioned your mum a few times. And I think we'll probably have some nice dialogue between us about this. But you mentioned that your mum was a single parent. You had a bit of a fraught relationship with your dad at times, and it grew into something, and it blossomed over time. But I know that when I was a young man, because similar situation, my mum and dad divorced when I was 8, and as far as I'm concerned, my mum was the one constant throughout that who showed up every day, took me to things, gave me opportunities to, you know, explore my own creativity, like the sports that I want to do, was literally there for every moment of my life. And, you know, God, like, she couldn't have done more.
I was going to say, she's still around. Sounds awesome.
Oh, she's incredible.
Yeah.
And I remember I really struggled during that divorce period where I was thinking, oh my God, like, I don't have like a male role model in my life to help me understand who I need to be as a man. When in actual fact, as time went on and when I reflected on all of this, I realized that actually I don't need a man to teach me how to be a man. No. All the strength and all the positivity and all the resilience and creativity that I was able to cultivate in my life was cultivated because my mum was there to either help me through or just guide me in a direction or give me the opportunities to become the person that I am today because of her. Yeah. But I spent so many years thinking, who's my male role model? And I think I often spent too much time looking at the person who wasn't there rather than looking at the person who wasn't going, you're my role model. And I only say that because, and I'd love to get your opinion on it, because I think often in life and the way men perceive women in our day and age, that, you know, you need to learn from a man in order to become a man, when in actual fact, my strength comes from a woman.
Yeah, do you know what? It's so interesting, and I think because I said to you before we started recording, I've started writing, or I've been writing this book, and in the book there's key moments in my life and where I can draw meaning from them, rather than suggesting anyone wants to read a bloody autobiography of me, and where there might be things that I think, reflections I have, thoughts I have that I think may cut into other people's lives, and so I talk about this, and I am acutely aware, first of all, you know, just because I say I'm a well-rounded individual, I don't know whether I am, but because of who I have become, that doesn't mean that someone who's been through a very similar situation should therefore, if they've not turned out like you or I are, somehow they've failed, because I think there's so many different things that can impact that. I think it sounds like your mum as well. My mum was kick-ass. My mum was awesome. I don't know how she did what she did. You know, she worked full-time in the NHS, volunteered left, right and centre all over the place, and still brought up 2 kids. Unbelievable. Almost sets a bar so incredibly high. Mm-hmm. I think she absolutely did that. You know, some of the grit that I have in me is absolutely down to her. 100% down to her. Some genetics, some of the key things she did in my formative years as an athlete, as I was trying to navigate my way through school, and I wasn't academic, but I wanted to go to university, and how I overcome that was grit. And so she did that, which I don't think is a gender trait, but some people might perceive that as a masculine trait. I don't think it is at all, and I'm with you. So I think some of that is nonsense, and it's just, I think the bits of me that the sensitive, emotional bits that are able to step into vulnerability come from her. Would they have come from my dad? Probably not. I'm also very lucky. So the church I grew up in, there was a couple who'd moved, who weirdly knew my nan from the church, different church, many years before that. They moved to our area, and somehow I got to know them. And they were only, I mean, I would have been maybe 12, 13 years old. They were probably 26, 27. He ran the band in the youth group, and I just got to know him. And I used to go around and wash his car every Sunday, and then I started doing his gardening, and then we'd go off to air shows. And Peter Peter and Elaine are still dear friends of ours. He's godfather to Seb, and Elaine is godmother to Imogen. And if I am very fortunate. I recognise the fact that I think in those teenage years, and I did go off the rails. Whilst I don't like to talk about it particularly publicly, you know, trouble with the police and started smoking and lots of things at a point that align with sort of the divorce.
Yeah.
My mum played a key role. He played a key role. I'm very, very lucky that, and I don't. Without those two, and who they are, then I don't think I'm here as this version of me now. And so I think I recognise in my story Peter's role is key. Yeah, absolutely key. You know, as a devoted husband, as a good man, as an amazing dad, he, at a time where I probably questioned dads or my dad, I think he was able to show me something different. Yeah.
Absolutely, and I totally get that as well, because while I was trying to reconcile in my own head the relationship I had with my dad when I was younger, someone else who was always there in my life was my granddad. Right. But because I didn't look at him as my dad, it was easy to discount all the things that he was doing for me and all the times he was there for me when he was alive, because it's easy to just take it for granted. And it's not until later on in life and after he died that I kind of like was thinking about it, and I was actually like, he was there to pick me up from school, he was making me tea when I'd come back from school, and just again all these little things where it's just like someone just showing up daily, just doing the small things. You're like, that's, I had that all along. I had like the role models around me all along, and sometimes you just don't see it because you're a little bit too caught up in the relationship that you want and that you don't have, which is absolutely fine, because you pine for a fatherly relationship. You know, you want your father in your life, but sometimes it does just take a moment to think, well, do I have it there already? And if it's not in the form of my dad, is it someone who's there showing up in different ways, like my granddad, or a role model at a sports club, or someone from church? You know what I mean? Like, there are people around you who, you know, can form a part of that piece that maybe you feel as though is missing. Yeah, I think it's that so many things shape the people we are, and for me, every single element of what's got me to where I am, I'll take some credit for bits of it, but I'll always recognise that there's so many other individuals for whom their role to varying levels has informed and enabled the person who's here. I think that's the same for everyone, and people face different challenges in life, but it's part of some of the things that I've built into my daily practice is I don't just want to recognise the Simons or the Peters. I also want to recognise those tiny little moments day to day, because there's an awful lot of things pumped into our ears and into our brain right now is negativity and toxic and bad people or bad behaviours, and those, there's certain individuals that are, but we're surrounded by other individuals who very quietly do things that have a positive impact, and that may not be as profound as your granddad or Peter, but I think that to me is something that's really, really important. It's like the connection thing though. The world is pushing us in a certain direction. Because that gets clicks, right? And that's what the news is about, and that's what you know, power over, as Brené Brown will say, demands levels of fear and brutality, and that must increase all the time, because then they have power over, and part of that is to suggest the world is terrible. It's not. There are moments of beauty, kindness and wonder all around us. They're amazing, like your granddad and Peter. There's also tiny moments as well.
that doesn't undo the trauma people go through. But I think if we take the time to recognise the moments of light, then the moments of darkness perhaps become a little less. And I think that's something I don't preach that, because I'm working on it.
Yeah.
I'm working on it all the time, because that helps me show up in the world, not as jazz hands, Mr. Positivity, but is able to recognise things.
Yeah.
And that, that helps me show up and be the person I want to be.
That's really beautiful. And I think that's a really beautiful way to tie off this whole conversation. So Ivan, thank you very much.
Mate, thank you.
I wouldn't be surprised if we get home today and realise that we're just burnt down one side of our body.
As a ginger, I did put some factor 30 on.
Did you? Okay.
Gingers don't go out in the sun without protection.
I'm raw dogging it today in the sun, so I'm going to be burnt. But no, I appreciate it. Thank you so much. This has been lovely. I mean, Christ, we could do a part 2 conversation, because I feel like I could talk to you for ages. So much to unpack, but it's been beautiful. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Alex. Cheers, man. Thank you. Cheers.
Appreciate it.
Man. Cheers.